I thought we should begin our discussion with the situation at West. And Chairman Shaw, I'd like to start off with you. You know, there are a lot of questions that people have about this situation in terms of, you know, how could a fertilizer plant be located so close to a city? You know, what is the regulatory history, concerns of this plant? How did this explosion happen? And there's obviously an investigation ongoing. I'm wondering if you have learned anything, you know, sort of new over the weekend about what might have happened that you can share with us, and also how this sort of investigation unfolds from TCEQ's perspective.
Sure, and thank you for the chance to talk about this issue. One, certainly it is indeed a tragedy. As you look at several of let me back up and start with where the process is. You know, we're really in the beginning stages of investigating what happened. We started, you know, after the event happened, the first and primary goal is trying to secure the area, make sure that the responders and the public are safe, and then trying to rescue anyone that could be saved at that point, and then moved into the recovery phase. And that wrapped up, I guess Saturday really was the last where they were through the recovery component, and that sort of started in earnest the opportunity to start assessing what happened, as well as starting to assess what the environmental impacts might be associated with that too. And so, for example, when I was up Friday, we were in the processes of starting to evaluate how we're going to go about assessing, you know, what are the things we need to be looking for, what are the things we need to be concerned about to make sure people aren't in harm's way. So all of that said, if you look back at some of the questions that have been asked, and I have to say it's been a bit concerning that on the heels of the tragedy, there were a number of articles that were suggesting that this is a failure of environmental regulations or regulation in general. We still had bodies that hadn't been recovered at that point. And so it wasn't the right time for that. We're getting there. Specifically, as you look at what has happened and what we know and what have you. The facility located near town, actually when it was built in, I think, 62, was built about a mile north of town. And so town grew up around it. And the reason that's important is because we want to make sure we look at what other situations are out there and we understand what other potential tragedies there are that need to be avoided. Furthermore, it's also, we have many of these, hundreds of facilities like this across the state, and fortunately, they don't explode very often. In fact, if you look at this, while we know there are dangers inherent to some of the materials that are handled in these facilities, we don't see these explosions often. And it points us to what I started off with, that we need to make sure we let the investigation understand what happened so that we can make decisions so we solve the right problem. For example, while it's been suggested that maybe there's not enough inspection occurring, the environmental community doesn't have the safety responsibility. That's other agencies that are involved with that, specifically the Office of the Texas State Chemist, and there's a federal agency, the U.S. Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Administration. It's my understanding that the Texas State Chemist was there 12 times last year, and so what we need to make sure is that we know what to look forward to, or what we look for going forward, in that this doesn't happen that often. What was unique about this situation? Is there some new component that's there, some new situation that we can avoid, or is it something we need to look very strongly about, saying there's this hazard that can't be mitigated, therefore we need to make sure we separate these from people? But that's premature to get to that point. We just know that this was a tragedy that was different than we've seen before, and the investigation will lead us to that point where we can understand what happened, and then we can answer those questions. And I think there'll be a very rigorous review about what to learn from what happened in this case.
Now, Jim, one of your colleagues at Environmental Defense Fund, Elena Kraft, wrote a blog post entitled "Explosion at Texas Plant Renews Concerns About State Environmental Agency." You know, is this an Texas environmental regulatory failure or concern, or is it an OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health concern? Where we still don't know what happened.
Yes and yes. Let me apologize a little bit for my tone today. I don't normally speak in the words I'm going to use, but the deaths in West Texas are a little personal with me. For 30 years, every fall I drive to see my beloved Horned Frogs play football in Fort Worth. And invariably I stop at the Czech shop in West Texas. These are the nicest people in the world. And I believe because of failure of state government, people are dead now. Maybe it's the people in that check shop, or it's certainly their sons, or their their sons, or their husbands, and we've got to do something. We don't know everything right now, but we know certain things. Number one, we know this is not the first accident. No, they don't blow up every day, but they happen. We have accidents in Texas way too often. We lead the nation in fatal industrial accidents. We got to do something about this, and do something more than go to funerals. It's time to stop. These accidents happen in recent years in Texas City twice, in Waxahachie, and in Bryan. We just stop it. And this is what we know about the environmental side. They got a grandfather, that's the first thing we should have never done, grandfather this plant. They had a permit, temporary permit in 2004. They were supposed to come in to get another permit. They never did. The state agency did nothing about it. Never came in and shut them down, never went in and got a court order. They kept operating since 2004. That's the permitting side. And so the legislature is looking at permitting right now, and guess what they're doing? There's bills zipping through the legislature to make it easier to get a permit without proper review. Doing away with the contested case hearing, or at least the key parts of it, doing away with key parts of the compliance history. I'm sorry, these things have results. Let's talk about the inspection. Last time the agency was out there was 2006. That was because when we had a complaint. The agency doesn't go out and inspect generally these kind of facilities unless there's a complaint. Other states like New Jersey go regularly. Look for problems and fix problems in advance. Don't go after the fact and figure out what happened. They stop things. Now, I don't think the people at TCEQ are evil or doing this on purpose, but they don't have enough resources. And a lot of us in this room have been quiet while we've been cutting the muscle from our regulatory agencies. When Chairman Shaw took office in 2007, that's right, the budget for TCEQ was operating budget was $480-something million, $487 million, I think. Last year it was $357 million. We've gained over 2.5 million people during that time. We don't have enough inspectors. We don't have enough ability to do permits right. The commission's not asking for enough money, and frankly, the environmental community is not raising hell enough about this. People are dying, low taxes, and the friendly business community means we're not doing our job, and there are consequences. I'm sorry, I like those people in West Texas. Somebody needs to say, the emperor has no clothes, and I'm going to start doing that today. I'm sorry. This is.